Welcome to Astrology 101, Class 3. Today we're going to look at the first 6 houses of a chart. So the astrology chart is a map of the heavens brought down to a two-dimensional piece of paper. And so each segment of that paper chart represents an area of life. And so when you were born, at the moment of breath, that's why the birth time is so vital, it sets up the wheel. At that moment of breath, then the chart is cast for that moment in time. And the ascendant or rising sign, those terms are interchangeable. The ascendant is based on that exact moment of breath, that exact moment of life, and it represents the degree of the sign on the horizon at that exact moment in time. And that becomes your ascendant or your rising sign. And the ascendant, based on the time of year and the time of day especially, represents the physical body and the lifestyle. So we've already looked at the fact that the moon is the outer personality, the sun is the inner core nature, and the ascendant is the type of body you inhabit and the type of lifestyle that you live in the day-to-day. So let's look at a few ascendants. So if you have Aries rising, which in the natural zodiac, Aries is the ruler of the first house, and it rules that ascendant in a sense. So let's say you have Aries rising. And so it's a person who is headstrong and impulsive in their day-to-day life and perhaps very physically oriented. They might play sports, but they might be a sports spectator, and they will do some things. They'll be runners, or they might do kickboxing, or they will work out in some way. They're usually very physical because we remember that Aries is a fire sign, and so it's very movement oriented, and it's very physical. You know how fire is. It likes to move. The flames shoot up, and it likes to do things. And it's a doer. And so Aries rising is a person who is a doer. They like to do things. They're not necessarily dependent on outcome or accomplishment. They are starters. They are people who like to start something and get something off the ground. So if you have a Scorpio ascendant, we know that Scorpio is very private, secretive sometimes, very deep. So this person's day-to-day life, they're very sensual. They don't like everybody knowing about them, so they might like back alleyways and side streets when they go out into the world. And they're private about what they do in the day-to-day. They might not divulge, what their schedule is for the day. They just want to know it themselves and plan it out themselves, but not necessarily have everybody know what they're up to. Let's say Leo rising, Leo ascendant, somebody who likes to do things up big. Let's paint on the walls, let's do murals out at the outside wall of the community center. It's somebody who may throw great dinner parties. Their day-to-day life is just big and full and doing things in a kind of grand way. And let's say Virgo rising. Virgo rising is a very high-strung nervous system. They need to get out with animals. They need to get out into nature and put their back up against a tree. They have a very high-strung nervous system, so getting away from human company would be recommended. And so it carries the qualities of the sun sign into the body, into the day-to-day lifestyle. So let's say you have Aquarius rising. So Aquarius rising likes to do things in very different eccentric ways. They don't mind living on their own without a partner. They don't mind traveling by themselves, just picking up and taking off whenever it suits them. They're very individualistic, and no matter how you might think they are, they'll prove to you that you are a little off, and they're doing things a lot differently than you might think. They just hear that beat of a different drummer and will surprise you. Walk into a party, dressed for Halloween when everybody else is having a summer patio lightweight dinner or something, you know. So then that ascendant becomes the beginning point of the first house. So the first house is about self and personal identification, how you see yourself. It's your personal life, early childhood. It's an angular house. An angular house is a very important house. And you'll see as we go through the different houses that they each have different qualities. There's 3 different qualities, and this is the first one. An angular house, when you have planets in an angular house, they carry more weight in the chart interpretation than planets in the other 2 types of houses. So an angular house is very important. And this house is ruled by Aries because Aries is the first sign in the natural zodiac. So any planet in this first house, no matter what sign that planet is in, will have the qualities of Aries in the background. So let's think about that. So let's say you have Mercury in Aquarius in the first house. Well, we know that Mercury is the mind and the communication skills, and in Aquarius they're going to have a kind of abstract mind, a mind that can kind of study astrology and also balance their checkbook within seconds of each other. And yet it's in Aries house, the first house, so it's going to be an impulsive mind, a mind that is ready to pioneer new ways of doing things. Not necessarily an Aquarian trait if that Mercury's in Aquarius, but definitely Mercury in the first house with an Aries quality. It wants to be the first kid on its block to know what the latest news is, or what the latest information is. And so it's a mind that is quick and quick thinking, and because of that Aries fieriness, and rash and impulsive, and sometimes quick to anger in the mind. Not so much the feelings, but in the mind, ready for an argument, kind of. And depending on what aspects that Mercury has, then that's how it will play out. So now we look at the second house. So the second house is about values and priorities. It's what's important to you. What's your bottom line? Where you make a stand for what's vital to you. And it's also about money and resources. Again, what's available to you in that sense of financial and resource-wise. A resource is not necessarily a cash flow. It can be something that somebody gives you access to that you might need for your business or your personal life. And so it doesn't have a cash flow, but it's important. It's movable property, so not necessarily a house, but maybe a piano, or maybe things that you've accumulated that are vital to you, like a library, your own personal library. And it's a succedent house, and it means that it's a house that is a little bit less important than the angular house. So it carries some weight in the chart, not as much as an angular house. And so a planet here would be a little bit less important or less visible than an angular house. And it's ruled by Taurus. So the background energy is always Taurus energy. And so let's say you have Mercury in Leo in Taurus's house. And so Mercury in Leo, thinks big, is enthusiastic, wants to share everything it knows with other people and gathers knowledge for its own sake. And yet it's in Taurus. It wants that knowledge to be practical and be able to use it, in practical ways. So Mercury in Leo in Taurus's house, that background Taurus energy is there. And so Mercury in Leo can be a little stubborn because it's fixed fire, but having Mercury in Taurus's house emphasizes that fixedness and that stubbornness at times. So let's say you have Venus in Aquarius in Taurus's house, second house. So Venus in Aquarius, dresses in reds and purples and oranges all together, plaids and prints all together. They are very humanitarian people. They make a really good friend. And Venus in Aquarius hears that beat of a different drummer and, likes to go off and do their own thing. And yet, with Venus in the second house, in Taurus's house, there's going to be a real attention to finances. There's going to be a real attention to, if I do this, does it go against what I believe to be right and just and true? And if it does, I can't do it because it goes against my values and priorities, and I can't go there. So, the energy of the house, and I can't emphasize this enough because in the beginning years when I studied astrology, there was no emphasis placed on this. And so I missed a whole piece of interpretation. And then one time I looked at these two brothers and their charts were so similar. Same rising sign, same sun sign, different moon signs, but one had the sun in the 11th house and one had the sun in the 12th house. And when I looked at their lives, I could see the difference. Even though same rising, same sun, one had Venus in a sign that the other one had Jupiter in and vice versa. And so very similar lives, some things a little different, and the house placement of their sun was so different in interpretation. And that's when I realized I need to pay attention to this piece of study, this piece of interpreting the astrological chart. So now we move to the third house. The third house is a house of communication and language because it's ruled by Gemini, and we already talked about Gemini and how Gemini is very much about the mind and communication and language and speaking. It's about short distance travel, so like commuting or going to the next town over. It's not crossing the great waters. It's not far distance travel. This is short distance travel, day to day, kind of back and forth. It rules siblings, your brothers and sisters. If you don't have any, then it rules the people that you are close to, like aunts and uncles or even neighbors. And so it says that those relationships are represented by this house, and planets there would suggest how you feel about siblings or how you feel about the people close to you, not parents. This is not the house of parents. It's ruled by Gemini, and it is a cadent house. So a cadent house are the least influential in the chart. So those are the three types of houses: angular, succudent, and cadent. So having planets here is going to have a background sound of Gemini energy. And so if you have Mars in Scorpio in the third house, and this isn't taking into consideration aspects or anything like that, it's saying Mars in Scorpio is very deep, very intense, very private, very investigative, really plays its cards close to its chest. And here it is in the house of communication. Well, this is going to be a person who communicates a lot more than you would think a Mars in Scorpio would ever think of communicating. They'll be social and communicate over the backyard fence or with their neighbors, perhaps. They might be in touch with their siblings, depending on the aspects to that Mars in Scorpio. And so let's say you have Mercury in Cancer in the third house. Mercury in Cancer likes to learn through osmosis. Doesn't necessarily communicate a whole lot, kind of mulls things over inside, likes to feel things more than think things in a lot of ways. But you put Mercury, which rules Gemini, so it's the ruler of the third house in that sense, in Cancer, in Gemini's house, this person would be a lot more communicative than you would imagine a Mercury in Cancer person would be. And so they might talk to you about recipes. They might talk to you about healing techniques. They might talk to you about how to create safe emotional space for your clients or how they do it. Because Cancer is about creating safe space. Cancer likes to cook. But this is Mercury in the third house, in Gemini's house, and so it has things to say about those particular issues or those particular situations that it's involved in. Here is the fourth house. The fourth house begins with the angle of the IC. It's called the medium coli, the night of heaven, you could say. It is the midnight point of the chart. It is the cusp between the third and fourth house, and for brevity, we call it the IC. It is the beginning of the angular house, the fourth house, but I want to talk about the IC because the angles sometimes stand on their own. They're very important. So the IC is that midnight point of the chart, and it's the place where the personality has access to the soul. And the soul is to the personality as the house is to the physical body, because it's the beginning of the fourth house of the home. So that IC is a place where a person can tune into the deeper energy that's kind of running the show. You know, the soul chose the birth time, the soul chose the family for this personality that it's created to have learning experiences, and the soul to have this vicarious learning experience and just experience, period. So the IC is that connector point between the soul and the personality. And then we move into the fourth house of home and family, where you live, how you live, and who lives there with you. It is the place of growing up in the original home, family of origin, and it is the home you create as an adult out in the world, doing your adult life experience. It's a place of security. Traditionally, it is the house of the mother because for eons of time, the mother was the person who stayed home. Now, it's flexible because the father, if the father is staying home, house husband, or just even retired, and the woman is still in the world working, then the mother or the wife or the female of the household, that would be more 10th house affairs, which we'll get to in the next class. And the male becomes the new ruler of the 4th house. So it's anyone who stays home and tends the home. It can be somebody who builds homes. Somebody who has a sun in Scorpio, because they're builders and transformers. If they have their sun in the 4th house, because this is ruled by Cancer and this is the home, they might be somebody who buys a house, completely renovates it, and then sells it or lives there. But it's somebody who could be a realtor and sell homes as well. So the 4th house is ruled by Cancer. It's where you feel secure and safe, hopefully. It's an angular house. So the 1st house was the first angular house. The 4th house is the second angular house. So planets here are important. They take precedence in the chart. So let's say you have Venus in Leo in the 4th house. Venus in Leo likes to do things up big and may be a great dinner party thrower. Somebody who hostesses or hosts great dinner parties. They like to take pride in their home, Leo. They like to entertain, Leo. They like to have people appreciate what they've put out on the table or the decor itself. Venus in Leo in the 4th house. Let's say you have Jupiter in the 4th house. Let's say Jupiter in Sag in the 4th house. So Sag is the traveler, remember, and Jupiter is what we have an abundance of. So Jupiter in Sag is a love of adventure, a love of seeing the bigger picture, a love of travel and multicultural situations, and a curiosity to see what's over the next hill. And so Jupiter here in the 4th house in Sag, but in Cancer's house, it can be one of two things. They can feel at home anywhere. So Jupiter in Sag, adventuring, but the Cancer background wallpaper, so to speak, is about home. So they can feel at home anywhere, or they are the foothold for other people passing through. They are the B&B, or they are the the Airbnb. They are the couch. They offer, sanctuary for people traveling through, friends or strangers or whatever. But they're the ground. They have the home, and they're open to travelers and other people passing through. The 5th house. The 5th house is ruled by Leo, and it is the house of children, which is the creative effort of the body. It rules creative self-expression, the 5th house. So children are the creative effort of the body. A poem is the creative effort of the mind and emotions. Dance is the creative effort of the body and the heart, let's say. So it is about creativity in many forms. Somebody who has their sun in the 5th house might be somebody who works with children, a teacher, somebody who tends to children's needs in some form. And they could be an artist, or they could be an artist. Somebody who has Venus there could have a love of art, a love of music, a love of creativity, dance and theater and all of that. Because Leo rules this house, they're a spokesperson, a leader, a teacher. They're the teacher who works with kids in the classroom, or if it's, let's say, Sun in Sag, in the fifth house. They might have wilderness programs for children and take children out camping and teaching them survival skills. That's a possibility. Let's say it's Mercury in Gemini in the fifth house. This is somebody who's a writer, a teacher of writing, a networker, somebody who brings people together around ideas and concepts. So it's a succedent house. Another way to say that is succeedent house. It succeeds the first angular house, so it's secondary. So it's secondary in importance to the angular house. The fourth house was angular. The succeedent house follows next, the fifth house. And so it is a little bit less important than the angular house, but still has an important position. And it's ruled by Leo, so it has a real sense of taking pride in what you do and being creative in some form. And again, that can be a dinner party or bringing people into a circle when you can see that they feel left out or on the outside of things. That's an art. That's definitely an art and a skill. So art has many forms. The sixth house. The sixth house is the cadent house in that angular, succeedent, and cadent houses. It rules health, and it rules day-to-day interaction on the job, in your work. It's not career, it's your work. It's how things go in the day-to-day. It's the people you interact with. It's volunteering. It's working in the world in some form. It's your health. And it says, it has to do with, what you do about your health, and the sign that's on that sixth house cusp tells you how you approach your health, and what the ruler of that sign on the sixth house cusp, where it is and what its aspects are, also give you a clue to health. And I'll look more into this whole notion of health in a separate class. By then you might have some more ideas and concepts and have planted some seeds around astrological language that we can step into looking at health from an astrological point of view. So it's your job. It's not your career, it's your job and how you take yourself to the job every day. It's a cadent house. Planets here are less important than the succeedent house just before. And it doesn't mean they don't have merit and they don't hold sway. They absolutely do, but they're not as important as the other two houses. This house is ruled by Virgo. Virgo is about health and healing, and it's about alternative health. It's about conventional health, like AMA. It's about traditional health, which is more Native American or Native people's health and healing traditions. And so this is the house having a planet there where you find your analytical skills sometimes adequate, sometimes too much. Let's say you have a sun in Aquarius in the sixth house. So sun in Aquarius, here's the beat of a different drummer anyway, and it's in Virgo's house. It's going to have a penchant for health and healing, and especially modalities that are out there, considered out there, like sound healing. That's a kind of abstract concept, although they're finding with sonar and the whales and different types of frequencies that it does influence the DNA, it does influence the molecular structure. So at one time that would have seemed very abstract and out there as a concept for health and healing. It is coming more, it's being massaged more and more into mainstream. So energy healing would be considered here as an abstract concept for healing. Maybe Reiki would be considered something like that, where it's just, real energetics. That would be Sun in Aquarius in the 6th house. Let's say Virgo's in Capricorn in the 6th house. So Venus in Capricorn is about business. It's about goal orientation. It's about getting from here to there. And it's really about, shoulder to the wheel, perseverance, moving through. And it's in the house of Virgo's analytical capacity or health orientation. So they're able to calibrate things. They're able to analyze things, and they can make a business out of health and healing. And they have goals that they want to meet, benchmarks, sequential order. First I'll get this off the ground, then I'll advertise and, network with other people, and then I'll have the business I want to have. And they'll analyze it and take it apart. A woman who has Venus in the 6th house of health has to be careful not to overanalyze everything she puts in her mouth, or every pound she gains, or everything she does, because it will not serve her if it becomes too much of a drive for perfection. Seeing a pound materialize on her body after having a birthday celebration. Maybe it's there, maybe it isn't. But overanalyzing everything until you're making yourself ditzy, so to speak. So it's just looking at the gifts of the 6th house as an interest in health and healing, and an interest in and a capacity to be analytical, but not pushing the envelope too much. So what I want to say in ending the first 6th house look is this. This is the bottom of the chart. When you look at the wheel, this is the bottom of the chart. So this is introversion. These are personal houses. Being born, first ascendant, and 1st house early childhood, 2nd house values and priorities, 3rd house siblings and the people around you, 4th house family, 5th house creativity, and 6th house your ability to analyze things, take care of your health, your diet, that kind of exercise, all of those things of the 6th house. And your day-to-day interaction with people in your sector. Yes, it can be a job, but it hasn't breached the upper part of the wheel into the outer life, the more extroverted part of the chart. So the homework for Class 1 is to read in Robert Cole's Book of Houses the intro, pages 7 through 9, and also the chapter How to Read Your Own Chart, and through the first 6 houses, pages 15 through 75. And this will give you an idea, his idea, but a very classically held idea of what the first 6 houses are all about. So this is a generally speaking view of the houses. So you see in the 1st house, you see the ascendant, and then you have, and it's sunrise, and you have the qualities of the 1st house, and then you have, and the ruler Aries, and the ruler also Mars, because Mars rules Aries. Then you have the 2nd house and its qualities, and its ruler Taurus, but also Venus, because Venus rules Taurus. And then you have the 3rd house of Gemini, and the qualities of Gemini there, and the ruler is Mercury. And you have the qualities of that house, and then you come to the midnight point of the chart, the IC. And then you have the fourth house, which is an angular house ruled by Cancer and also ruled by the moon. And then you have the fifth house, which is ruled by Leo and also the sun. And then you come to the sixth house, which is ruled by Virgo and also Mercury. And you are getting ready for the descendant, which is opposite the ascendant, and which is the sunset instead of the sunrise, which we will talk about in the next class 2 of this series. So I wish you all well, and good luck with your studies in astrology. Bye-bye.